You know, it was bound to happen. And we have a third wheel this week. I hate to admit it, but this is what happens in times of pandemic. Third wheel, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let's see if the dating game contestants can guess who you are. Where do you come from?
You know, as somebody who's never been married, who tends to just be the third wheel every time he's invited out on a Friday and Saturday night because, like, the guy and the girl are going out, I got nothing to do. I'll be the third wheel. Maybe the girl will be my wingman at the bar or the restaurant. I am used to being called the third wheel, Wade. So
Okay.
thank you for not only having me back on the show, but also reminding me of a personal failure in my life, which is never having a date or getting married and being single forever.
There we go. Well, Tim and I want to welcome you back to the show.
Hey,
Mark,
Mark.
good to have you.
Oh, it's great to be back. It is great to be back. And by the way, folks, you can't see this, but we are recording on Zencaster, but we can all see each other on Skype.
It's either a miracle of modern technology or it's Frankenstein.
So Wade, I can see, seems to be in his garage.
Yeah.
And Tim, you seem to be in your home. Just
in the studio, home. Baby, in Marengo House.
Okay.
So anyway, I wanted to start the show off by reading. There was a thing that happened this last week. There was a rumor, and then about 48 hours later, the rumor was confirmed, which is that Disney, and they can always change their minds on this. We know how they change their minds, but Disney is going to no longer release 4K UHD Blu-rays of its catalog titles, its live-action catalog titles, which means Alien, The Sound of Music, all that Fox stuff, as well as likely old classic Disney stuff like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and The Swiss Family Robinson. None of that will ever see a 4K release. And so this is a very disappointing thing. A lot of people feel like Disney's trying to use their weight to crush 4K and force people onto streaming. And there was a really great post on the Facebook page from longtime listener Daniel Sibner, who said, and I want to read his entire post because I think it just sums up what we're all feeling, and then we'll have a little discussion about it. He says, here's what really bugs me. The decline in physical media sales has really been based on the idea that more people are turning to digital, but digital wasn't something that the public adopted naturally like they ever did with physical media. Studios slowly declined to want to manufacture physical media in order to skimp on cost and distribution. Special features started dwindling years ago during the almost 10-year mark of Blu-ray. Been to a Best Buy or Target or any other retail store within the last few years? The shelves are never stocked, organized, or maintained in any way. There's been an active push to get rid of physical media, despite the fact that people still come in looking for it. The public has from the get-go been fed a false bill of goods, being convinced that digital is the better way to go, thinking that digital is some sort of permanent ownership, which it's not. How many collectors have had friends or family members make the argument, but it's all online, it's all on Netflix, it looks just as good while streaming? This was not a conclusion they came to on their own. Businesses led them to believe that was the fact, stating things like, there are over 100,000 blah, blah, blah number of movies on their services, when you honestly can't find anything most of the time. It never looks as good as when being played from a physical disc, not nighttime scenes, hello. It's never true 4K because whose bandwidth is that good? And no, it's not all online. And even if there are a lot of movies on any service, any one service, they all eventually get yanked because of licensing deals. The public never abandoned or lost interest in physical media because they decided to do so on their own. Like companies like Disney pushed the idea because it meant they didn't have to be the bad guy when they stopped putting in the effort. People would believe they were getting just as much, if not more, with streaming. And the biggest hypocrisy, the Disney Movie Club, holding specific titles hostage under an exclusive distribution plan that requires collectors to spend more and more money. Anyone else remember Columbia House? Why have such a specific exclusive setup for physical media if deep down you don't see the profit in it? If anything, I hope Disney becomes quite frivolous with sharing their distribution licenses, both theirs and the Fox titles, with the top boutique companies. I'd much rather Criterion or Arrow or Kino Lorber or Olive or Shout put out their catalog titles. More special features, and probably because they don't have all of the other stuff to worry about. Much better remasters. Apologies for the rant, but collecting physical media is one of the few things that brings me joy in this messed up world at the moment, as I know it brings all of you joy as well. It's annoying when our hobby is threatened to become extinct or at least throttled in some major ways, simply because of what the mass audiences blindly choose to do. Okay, I need a drink. Thank you for allowing me to vent. Long live physical media. And thank you, Daniel Sibner, because that just perfectly crystallized all of my thoughts as well. Tim, Mark, weigh in.
Go, Mark.
Well, I think it's interesting that he makes a lot of amazing points, and I completely agree with him. What's interesting is that you have a guy who all of us are the same. All we want to do is spend our own money to buy these products that they made that we love, but they're saying, nah, we don't want you to do that. It's almost like it's almost a personal rejection of what you're trying to accomplish. When you spend your own hard-earned money because you love them so much, you want to put them in your home and own them forever, but they're saying, nah, we reject that. We're slapping you down. And the thing is that it's ultimately all about control. If you buy the disc, you bought it once, and you could have 50 people come over to your home and watch it, and they all watch it for basically free because you just bought it once. But if it's in digital, you've got to pay your $10 a month for Disney Plus or for whatever it might be. They feel like they can control it more and monetize it better if it's under their roof. And that the idea that we have it, we bought it once, we own it forever, just scares them because it's not monetizable once it's in my house.
Yeah,
Tim?
that ongoing income stream. That's what they want. I'm going to make you pay for Aladdin forever. And every other title in the library. That's what the dynamic is all about, so far as the company is concerned. And then there are we who are stuff people. I'm a stuff person. I like my stuff. I have actual albums, which are coming back, by the way. So the notion that everything should go on to the cloud or wherever it is, no, that's a bad thing. I want my stuff. I want it in the best possible condition, and I want it now.
And see, I always, because I am fundamentally fatalistic and because I come from the church of George Miller, I know that there will be a Mad Max future in which there will be no more cloud. There will be no more streaming. There will just be me out in the middle of the Australian outback with a bunch of, half-naked zombies bicycling to provide power. And that's the only way I'll be able to watch my movies. I will need my physical media at that point in time. Because that, again, when the zombies are bicycling to provide power, that's the only way I can watch a movie.
But will you be drinking
true.
your own urine? Will you be like Waterworld, where he urinates and then he pedals and it turns into drinkable water? Will you be doing that, Wade? And you know what? And honestly, will you enjoy it? Because I think you would.
I probably would. Yeah, I probably would. I'm sure I would.
A little squirt of Mio, fruit punch Mio, you're good to go.
Yeah, well.
Yeah,
anyway,
but this is a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing. And I do lament that we're moving into this world where everything that we quote unquote own will become digital. By the way, I've already lost a few movies that I've downloaded from Amazon Prime. Bought the movie, downloaded it. I go back and look, and that movie's not there anymore. Because they lost the whatever. So that I've already experienced the fact that does not work.
Yep. It's I think a lot of people are going to be very sobered with it. But I will say this, the two heavy hitters right now, even though 4K UHD is a Sony technology, Sony has not gotten as far as behind the technology as they should have. But Warner Brothers has. And Warner Brothers is the other, 800-pound gorilla out there with HBO Max, which we'll talk about again in a second. And they are, they just announced Full Metal Jacket on 4K coming out later this year. Hey, that's a catalog title. They've done Bridge on the River Kwai. They've done they did 2001 recently, so they understand that they understand what Disney clearly does not or doesn't want to. And so, despite the fact that there were 800 layoffs, by the way, at Warner Brothers on Monday, everyone that we know still has their jobs. But they are trying to sort of reduce that debt, and they're trying to. AT&T is slashing away, but there is still a faith in the catalog at Warner Brothers. So I think we can hope that will offset whatever Disney does. So anyway, the other thing is that speaking of Warner Brothers, on HBO Max, they added a warning introduction to Blazing Saddles, just like they did with Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there are some people who do not understand that Blazing Saddles is not a drama, and needed to have the jokes explained to them. I think we all kind of saw that coming, but really, it's Blazing Saddles, people. It's not Gone with the Wind.
Well, yes, satire, I think, is a completely different subject. when it comes
Yeah.
to these sort of Gone with the Wind. That was a necessary thing. It was a good thing. Blazing Saddles, Cleavon Little, in the 70s,
Yep.
late
Yep.
70s, was a
71,
very
72, whatever it was.
71, very sophisticated black man. He knows what he's doing. He understands the context of the humor that the wonderful Mel Brooks is communicating.
Yeah, well, I mean, and as Robert Downey Jr. has talked about with respect to Tropic Thunder, the whole point of those jokes is to underline how wrong the stuff is that they're making fun of.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it. So it does concern me a little bit that some of the corporate suits have so little faith in the power of satire and comedy and what it's intended to do that they are afraid that there are people out there who will take the jokes literally as opposed to for what they actually mean.
Well, there are, but
I
we can't
know, and
compare
that's a
ourselves with
problem.
them.
But
We can't
I don't know
lower
if
ourselves to that common denominator.
did people. Here's the thing. I don't know that people complained and
No.
then the studio reacted to it.
No.
The studio is trying to get in front of something
They are.
that maybe is not an issue,
Yeah.
but they don't want to take the chance that it becomes an issue because some idiot out there gets insulted by such and such because they're stupid.
That's it for sure.
And also, I will say this, not to defend them, but I would say that if just like Spielberg turning, guns for ET, right? Didn't he turn the cops? He CGI'd their guns and turned them into flowers or clubs or something like that.
Plowshares, swords into plowshares.
No, remember in ET there was a big thing where ET was re-released. Now you're making me Skype it. Come on, guys, DigiGods.com. E.T. Spielberg turns guns into what? Oh, you're killing me. You remember this when they released E.T. on Blu-ray?
Yeah, with the guns, and they took they made the walkie-talkies.
Thank you. So it's not like they are censoring Blazing Saddles or bleeping it or taking scenes out.
True.
They're keeping the movie as it is on the site, but they are trying to get ahead of a very scary phenomenon, which is the whole cancel culture and the sensitivity and the wokeness of it. They're trying to get in front of all that, whether it's necessary or not. And we can argue the fact whether or not wokeness and whatnot is a good thing or a bad thing. It's gone too far, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, the movie will still exist in its original form on the site.
Well, we will keep our eye on it. I think it's sad but kind of funny in its own weird way. It's a funny introduction. I mean, God bless her. She's kind of trying to take it seriously, but then you get in the movie, you're like, it's just silly.
Walkie-talkies, people, because Wade and Tim hung me out to dry on the first show I've done in like 3 years. Admit that he turned their guns into walkie-talkies in the re-release.
We were trying to remember things a long time ago, Mark. We don't do that anymore. We look it all up.
Well, let's dive into some of the DVDs. We haven't talked about docs in a long time. I'm just going to hit a few of these real quickly. And by the way, at the end of the show, I've pre-recorded a segment on anime, so I don't force Tim and Mark to suffer through me rambling about all the anime stuff. So we're gonna there's a pre-record segment at the end of the show. Hope everybody sticks around for it. It's a lot of fun. We've not done anime in a long time, and there's been a lot of great stuff past few months.
By the way, wait, before you start, I have to say that it makes me feel good that after all these years and years of not doing the show, you still are so stuck in your ways that you still start the show talking about movies that nobody cares about, which is documentaries.
That's right. Well, you know what? The first one I'm going to talk about, James Cameron's Story of Science Fiction.
Don't care.
Which is from AMC. This aired on AMC. This is actually really good. And I know I've been really critical of Cameron over the years, but this gets into, he actually is very eloquent in looking at the value of science fiction as speculative fiction, what it means for the movies, what it means for art in general. It's really it's quite good. And there are a lot of other people in here. There's Spielberg and Lucas and Christopher Nolan and even Schwarzenegger. They all show up. Guillermo del Toro comes in. So I mean, it's more than just Cameron. It's really very interesting.
I like the way that movie works its way over the decades, and it shows how the science fiction moved closer to science and further away from the fiction. So by the time we hit the late 60 Kubrick 2001, he's trying to get it right, and not making crap up.
And it becomes mainstream, It's a really good doc. We've also got You Don't Know Me, spelled Nomi, and you all know what that means.
Oh, showgirls, baby.
Okay, Mark, Tell us about your Showgirl, because you and I sat right next to each other when we at the press screening of Showgirls at the now demolished National Theater where I used to work. You, midway through the movie, were curled in a fetal position, moaning, physically moaning in the seat, and I'm not exaggerating.
You get way more a kick out of that story than I do. But just by the way, this was the cast and crew screening, so it was before anybody knew that the
Yeah,
movie was going to be this historic train wreck.
true.
So it wasn't like I was just buying into the pre-release or whatever, trying to be hip with the crowd who hated it. It was awful. As one of the first people to see the film in its entirety, it was really that bad. And yes, I was curled up in a ball at some point.
It was so funny. It was just so priceless to see Mark in a fetal position. Oh my gosh. Anyway, this is all about the aftertaste of the film, the its long tail that it has had as a pop culture phenomenon, and how it has become like a cult film, and it's almost like a Rocky Horror level of fanaticism about it. It's really, really a very, very good doc. It's very interesting, and I got to, my wife actually was part of the after the fact accounting team that came in to kind of clean up the books from Showgirls, which went on for at least a year after it was out of theaters. And so we actually have a bit of a history with that thing, and so it just lives constantly. I'm ever aware of the damn thing.
You know about that doc? What I like about that doc is it doesn't so much rehabilitate the film, but reconsider it. It puts it in a different context. It says, let's look at this film this way. And if you look at it this way, it doesn't make it a better film, but it makes it a more insightful film that we might have thought about in 1995. The other thing that it does is it does, in fact, rehabilitate young Elizabeth Berkley. The one thing that I never got way back then is the way people attacked her. I didn't get that. I'm like, she gave herself to Verhoeven and said, what do you want me to do? And he said, do it like this. And she said, okay. And did it that way. And we kick her in the face for 25 years? I don't get that. That was kind of vicious.
The poor girl had only done Saved by the Bell, the worst sitcom in history, and a 3-camera television sitcom. And Paul Verhoeven, A-list director, says, I would like for you to be in my big feature film written by Joe Esterhaas. How is she supposed to say no to that?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
It took a lot of bravery. There's a whole lot of naked in that movie. And she did it well. Note that we move forward 25 years, the 50 Shades of Grey movies. Whole lot of naked in that movie. We don't beat her up for those bad movies the way we did Elizabeth Berkley 25 years ago. I don't get it.
I agree. We've also got The Kingmaker, which is a Showtime documentary about Imelda Marcos, who feels like ancient history now. They tried to peddle this to us for LAFCA Awards last year. I don't know that it's a really great documentary. It feels like it's trying to sort of redeem her, or at least earn some sympathy a little bit. But I kind of feel like, Imelda's not doing so bad. She's not hurting. She's not, a Twitter phenomenon, but that's not my fault. So that's there for those who are interested. Any of you guys familiar with the doc A Bigger Splash on David Hockney from 1974?
I don't know that one.
I am not, although I do love the film A Bigger Splash with what is that film?
Ray Fiennes.
Yes, so good.
Yeah, this is not that Bigger Splash. Yeah, no, this is a 1974 documentary that apparently was a really big deal at the time, and I'd never heard of it. Obviously, I'm what am I doing watching films with about artists with LGBT under themes in 1974? Nothing. I want to watch Star Trek. So, but this is actually really, really interesting. I know nothing about David Hockney other than his paintings, and so this is a really, really interesting artifact. It's fully restored. They did a really great job. This is from Kino Lorber and Metrograph Pictures. And it really is a landmark film. It's a fascinating snippet of time and place, and gives you an amazing insight, not just into his work, but his life at the time. And Peter Schlesinger, who was kind of his artistic muse and lover, and it's really quite an interesting film. So A Bigger Splash about David Hockney, and then just a couple other little docs here that are worth mentioning. Got 3 from first run features, Graves Without a Name by Riti Pan, who is sort of the only name Cambodian filmmaker in the world. He made a film that I once saw at the Cannes Film Festival called Rice People. He has since moved away from narratives and primarily now makes documentaries about Cambodian history and the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields. And they are all amazing and powerful, and it's a real document about his country and their painful, bloody history. So this one is called Graves Without a Name, and it goes along with all of Riti Pan's other recent documentaries about the last 5, 6, 8, 10 years. And in this case, this is again the Khmer Rouge era, and specifically looking at a beginning with the exploration with a child, 13-year-old child whose family was killed. It's really, really quite a devastating film, made 2 years ago in 2018. We also have an immigration doc called Colossus, Indivisible Without Liberty and Justice for All. This is a Jonathan Scheinberg documentary that looks at one family's immigration ordeal and kind of uses it as a prism through which to look at the current immigration situation, which is it's a good doc. It's a little bit politicized, but not too much. It's good for discussion. And then the last one is Sea Drift, which is by a filmmaker named Tim Tsai, Tsai, and this is it starts in 1979, after the fall of Saigon, a few years later, when obviously Vietnamese came to the United States, many refugees, and then just a few years later in 1979, there's a killing where a Vietnamese refugee kills a crab fisherman in a town in Texas called Seadrift. Seadrift is the name of the town, and that gets into this that one incident explodes into this horrible racial thing that gets into class and culture and race, and the KKK becomes a part of it, and it's just this awful, awful episode in the history of this one town and in the history of Texas. And I didn't know about this story, but it's actually quite fascinating. You know, we're accustomed to Southeast Asian communities in Los Angeles and Orange County. Most of them came here and they settled. So Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian, those communities are part of Southern California tapestry. They're part of the San Gabriel Valley. I didn't know that there were communities in Texas, and I didn't know that these things happened. So that's a good film, Sea Drift. You might want to check that out. All right, let's move into some other stuff, guys.
Yes, sir.
You
I'm
want to
ready.
do new movies?
Yeah, let's do it.
The new movies, there are far and few between right now. So what I've been doing is looking at what these movies are about, and then trying to decide whether or not they would be theatrically releasable in this day and age, depending on what they're about. So some of them yes, some of them no. Those who deserve to die. So this is just a little thriller about this veteran who comes home. He wants to get his stuff together. He has these sort of family situations that he has to deal with, and a whole bunch of people get killed. There's nobody particularly big in it. Wade, what do you think? Would this possibly be a theatrically releasable movie if there were theaters?
I do not. You know what? No, I don't. I feel like this would be a VOD thing. IFC might pump this out into a few little art houses, but I don't. I think this belongs VOD.
Yeah, it's mostly a horror movie. Anyway, something like that. There's an Adam Agoyan film.
And Mark and I are going to get into this one.
Yeah. So, Adam was quite the guy back in the day. This one's called Guest of Honor. What do you think, Mark?
I am a huge fan. I am one of the many trillions of people who was so on board and loved Agoyan so much based on his salad days that we all know about. And we keep waiting for him, film after film, to return to what we love. And I have to say, when I settled into Guest of Honor, thinking to myself, okay, maybe this is the one where he'll get himself back on track. Unlike Wade, I have to say, I just think this thing to me, it was a bit of a mess. It started out great, interesting character, David Thewlis, Luke Wilson. It's got a good cast. It just feels very scattershot to me. It never really came together thematically. I enjoyed bits and pieces of it, but as a whole, it never really came together. And again, I am rooting for him so much. I just feel like maybe the best I can say about this film is that it's not a return to form for him, but it could be that intermediate step where the next film he gets back on track. Because I'm starting to feel it again here with him, even if I'm not feeling it again in total.
See,
Wait,
I really think he's back in form here. I think this film got a little bit unfairly maligned. What I used to love about Egoyan before he went off the rails, starting with the serial killer thing with Ian Holm. What was that called? That was kind of the one where everything went a little bit astray. But this is for me is like it's starting to get back to his form of the early '90s, where he's focusing. And this is a little bit like a sister film to The Adjuster. He's looking at these really unusual occupations, and it's one of these occupational dramas. He's back to moving all over the place in the timeline, nonlinear, jumping, and all over the place. But David Thewlis as a food inspector who has died, and now there's there's we're sort of learning about his life through a conversation between his daughter, who is somewhat estranged, and the priest who is supposed to sort of officiate his funeral. And we're finding out, and all of these things are kind of laid out very, very carefully. And I think Thewlis is brilliant. I think looking at his life through the incredibly weird and obsessive practices of a food inspector, I thought was just fascinating. I've never seen a movie about a food inspector. This is the first one. It's
Yeah.
got. I give it some props for that.
well, I've never seen a film that is so muddled and murky and half baked about a food inspector.
Yeah.
That much.
Anyway,
But again, I was rooting for it all the way. I was rooting for it all the way as a huge fan. Um, in fact, my Severine, my now ex girlfriend, Severine earned her PhD with a paper about music in Egoyan's films.
oh no
Hmm.
kidding. Oh, that's
That was how
interesting.
she earned her PhD. Isn't that crazy?
Well,
Uh,
Well,
there were some amazing films. The Sweet Hereafter, all those wonderful films from the like early, mid, late '90s. By the time you get to the, I don't know, early 2000s or so, I'm kind of done with Adam Egoyan. I did like Chloe and Adoration, though. I think those were in the middle 2000s.
yeah,
well,
yep,
Ararat
yep.
was Ararat was the one that should have been like this knockout
That should have
punch,
been it.
personal story, right? And Ararat, it has moments. It has moments of power when he's going through he's going through like the airport scanner. Remember the scene where he's going through the
But
airport scanner and they're looking at his luggage? It should have been that movie should have been a knockout. It should have been such a
do
personal, powerful statement, and it just wasn't.
do we agree that Rock Bottom was What Lies Beneath? Do
Yeah,
do
that was
we
horrible.
the
Interesting. Yeah,
that
that's
was
the one I
just
was looking at right here. Yeah.
oh, it's such a dreadful film. We also got a film this week, Automation. Either of you seen Automation?
That's the one about the killer robot.
That's the one.
Oh yeah.
You know what? This is actually a really really fun film. This is on Blu-ray from Epic. It is a low budget sci-fi film, but it's not that low budget. Like there's some investment in special effects and whatnot, and it's meant to be kind of funny. This is kind of like they've been trying to peddle it like Office Space meets RoboCop. It's got more going on. There's more stuff happening here, but it definitely has the RoboCop element. This is like it's a really interesting satire on workplace automation and people being replaced by robots. And in this case, there's this business that has this robot, and he's just kind of a service drone, and he walks around. It's a guy in a suit. It's a guy in a really weird looking robot suit. Walks around, and everybody loves the robot. And now they're going to automate and they're going to let people go. But you know who else they're letting go? They're going to let the robot go because he's a prototype and they got a better model. And they picked on the wrong robot because he's not just a prototype drone at a business. This robot has a military history. So, of course, all hell breaks loose in the end. Very, very funny in all the ways that it needs to be without losing sight of the fact that what it's really doing is trying to get us to talk about what it means to replace workers and whether or not it's worth it for the automation and the cheapness and the efficiency that we get out of it. Interesting discussion. And they wrapped it up, I think, in a really, really smart little film. So that is Automation. It's worth checking out. Tim,
Good.
other new movies.
Deathstroke, the animation series. Deathstroke is out of the DC universe. Am I correct? Wade, you would know.
Yes, that is. Yes, Deathstroke. It's a. In fact, they were talking about Deathstroke being a Batman villain in some future Batman film.
Yeah. Michael Chiklis is doing the voice here in a fairly brutal hack and slash that I think appears on the CW Seed or nothing like that. What do we got here? The entire what? First season?
This is a movie. This is a specific animated movie called Knights and Dragons, the movie, and there's only one little featurette on it as far as an extra. You know what? I'm not huge on the whole Deathstroke thing. They're trying to go into a darker direction, it seems, with a lot of these things. This is a Blu-ray DVD combo with a Movies Anywhere code on it. I don't know if going really super dark and villain oriented is the right direction for the DC universe. It's kind of
Look,
like Suicide Squad, right?
look. You know
It's the
what
same
problem
thing.
with these DC animated films are? They never look as good as the cover art. You look at the cover art and you're
True.
like, "This is gonna be badass," and then you look at the movie and it was written by like some 8-year-old with a crayon. It's just not good. Like, why can't they make the movie look as good as it's all CGI anyway?
I know.
Just okay. You know what? You know what video game has great? Oh, I'm going to forget it now. You know what? You guys are killing me. What is the what is okay, stop, don't stop the recording. What is the DC video game where everybody looks really super real? It's called it's like
DC video game.
is
Holly Hobby.
Injustice.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
Okay.
It's called Injustice. There's a series of them, a series of DC video games called Injustice. I believe it's a video game. And the characters look so real. They look way more real than any of these stupid Deathstroke movies. That's what they should be doing. It looks
Well, you
badass.
you you call them up. You tell them. You tell
Look,
them,
let me
Mark.
tell you something. Let me tell you something. I recently got a new addition to the family. It is a 65-inch 4K Sony Bravia television.
Good for you.
And so it was given me for free. It's for the super low price of free. And so I reconnected my PlayStation 4, which of course, because I was living overseas for a couple of years, I didn't do any of that stuff. And I bought two games. Wade and Tim, I know I'm an old man because I reconnected. I have a TV now. I reconnected my PlayStation 4. I bought Red Dead Redemption 2,
Oh my
Grand
God.
Theft Auto 5, and a baseball game.
And see, I thought you were going to say Ms. Pac-Man. You've disappointed me yet again. That's just, you need better
Red
taste.
Dead Redemption 2.
And we got one more new film here, The Wretched. Tim, do you know who the Pierce brothers are?
Ooh.
Have you heard of these
Yeah,
guys?
well, I covered this film for Film Week, so I know them to the extent that I did that. I tell you what, this is a fairly decent little movie, well acted. It's a young boy, his parents are getting divorced, he's dealing with all that. There's this kid next door. He sort of builds a little relationship with this kid disappears. Nobody seems to understand that there A was a kid next door, or B that he's disappeared, including the mother of that kid. Turns out there's a witch and a whole bunch of stuff involved. It's really a sort of neat little horror thriller that I dug a little bit. Way to go, Mr. Pierce Brothers.
Yeah. All right.
And by the way, but before we continue, I have to say that when you said Pierce Brothers, Pierce Brothers is a very famous mortuary in Westwood here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, is this a documentary about the Pierce Brothers mortuary? Because there's a lot of famous people buried in that mortuary.
Yeah.
Walter
That's where
Matthau,
we had my father's funeral.
Really?
Roy Orbison, Betty Page.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people buried in the Pierce Brothers mortuary. George C.
True.
Scott. Oh yeah, Ray Stark.
So let's hit some Criterion right now. Actually, I'm going to mention a couple of Flickr Alleys first because there's a couple of great titles from Flickr Alley.
Marilyn Monroe, by the way, Wade. Marilyn Monroe buried with the Pierce Brothers.
Really? Not
and
in
Jack
Hollywood
Lemmon.
Forever.
And Jack Lemmon.
Or
also
Forest Lawn.
buried
I
with
was
Pierce
thinking
Brothers.
Forest Lawn.
No, Westwood. Right
Pierce
near where you used to live, Tim.
Right over there. Wow.
Yeah.
In the black community, of course, it was always the Inglewood Cemetery,
where my parents are buried.
So it's just a really sort of interesting thing. Very famous people buried there.
By the way,
hip hop guys.
That Inglewood Cemetery, which also is where I believe is Tom Bradley buried there?
Yes, definitely.
I think he might be,
Definitely.
and I think Ray Charles is there as well.
Yeah.
There are a lot of old movie stars from the 30s, I think, who are also there. My parents are there, and that big splashy new complex that used to be the sports arena is going up right next door.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's going to be all gentrified and whatnot. Flickr Alley's got a couple of really interesting titles. One is from Nicholas Winding Refn got behind presenting this. This is Spring Night, Summer Night. Kind of an unusual thing for Flickr Alley because it's not a silent film. It's from 1967. It's not a silent era movie. It's a 1967 movie, and it really kind of a a fascinating artifact that I was not familiar with. They've restored it, and this is kind of like a neo-realist American independent film from 1967, and you can see what Nicholas Winding Refn is really into with this. It's got a really grungy new wave kind of kitchen sink realism vibe going. It doesn't feel of the era, but it's really a kind of a remarkable discovery. So it's really worth checking out. Give it a look if you like that particular era of European film. This is kind of like Bergman meets neorealism, and meets maybe a little bit of surrealism, all kind of exported. Lots of extras here. Really, really very interesting stuff on the history of the film. It is Spring Night, Summer Night. And then there's also, Mark will have a joke about this, from 1924, The City Without Jews, which is, it
It's the
was
story of
restored.
every city ever.
I knew you'd have a joke. And this is based on a very, very controversial 1924 novel. And it's kind of this. It in a way it is terrifying how this is almost prophetic of many aspects of the Holocaust, and what was eventually going to happen. And there's a lot of great bonus materials that are kind of added to this that speak to that, the role of Jews in Europe and whatnot. It's really, really fascinating. It's 91 minutes. It's an Austrian film from 1924, directed by H.K. Breslauer. Really, really worth checking out. Restored beautifully. The City Without Jews. So Criterion Films. Let's talk first for a second. Criterion has announced that there's going to be a relatively complete Fellini set coming out for the holidays, which we will cover on the holiday show. Not every Fellini film, but all the major ones that have been previously released by Criterion, including a few new ones. And kind of anticipating that, we have this amazing box, the complete films of Agnes Varda,
Ah,
who's very popular with the LA Film Critics Association. We've given her a few awards. I think a couple of awards, haven't we? Didn't we give her a couple of awards?
yeah. We lost her what, 2 years ago? After that, Faces
Like,
and Places, around that time.
yeah, it was pretty much right after that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and this is all of her films, and it is quite extraordinary. I mean, there is something like, what, 18 films, or somewhat 20 films. I forget exactly how many, but it's 39 films, including shorts. So 39 films altogether,
Mm.
including the really amazing stuff: Vagabond,
Ah.
Cleo from 5 to 7, and then all of the Kung Fu Master, which is really, really good, with Charlotte Gainsbourg, and then all the recent stuff like Varda by Agnes, Faces, Places, The Beaches of Agnes, The Gleaners and I, all those kinds of interesting career retrospectives. Um, Guys, sum up Agnes Varda for the listeners, why she matters.
Woman making movies.
Yeah,
At that
at a
particular
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly, early on there, and she had a unique and singular voice. When we think of Godard, we think of Truffaut, we think of all those folks. We think about what they do. You can do the same thing with Anais. She has a style of filmmaking, and it's seminal.
Well, she also took a lot from her life, in terms of the movies that, especially the documentaries, right? Her own experiences and the life she lived, and especially a lot of women's stories. I think that for that time, that was very unique and a needed voice, especially in the French New Wave, which was really mostly notable for women in front of the camera, not behind the camera.
Mm. And
Sure.
Anais also looked beyond herself, even beyond just France. I mean, a film like Black Panthers, 1968, 50 years ago, to engage in that culture that's not her culture, and halfway across the world. She didn't have to do that, but she could see the entire world. And I like the way she. So that's a really amazing film, Black Panther.
Chloe is still my favorite New Wave film. I'm going to say it. It's my favorite New Wave film. Putting it out there.
It's really great. It's the movie that kind of intoxicates a lot of critics. I know Peter DeBruge and Justin Chang, two of our colleagues. They particularly love it as well. Paul Schrader made a movie called The Comfort of Strangers
Right.
in 1990, which I don't think anybody ever expected would become a Criterion edition, and yet here we are. The Comfort of Strangers gets the
Harold
Criterion.
Pinter did write that screenplay.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. It's got a good cast, but that movie, and it's Paul Schrader, but it does that movie never came together in any
Chris
particular way
Walken,
that
Rupert
would
Everett,
warrant
Natasha
Criterion
Richardson, all
treatment.
those people. Yeah. Great cast.
Well, you know what? It's a great cast.
Helen Mirren.
Christopher Walken, Helen Mirren, Rupert Everett, Natasha Richardson, and it also has some amazing contributors. Dante Spinati and Angelo Badalamenti did the cinematography or the score. Dante Spinati shot it. It's a yes, it's very much a Harold Pinter adaptation of an Ian McEwan novel. It feels like a Buñuel film in many respects, a study of class and manners that all taking place on a holiday in Venice, where it's all sort of about the politics of human relationships. And you never quite feel like Schrader quite gets it, but at the same time, it's really interesting that all these people did come together on this one film, and that it didn't quite fire on all cylinders. Tons of new interviews here with everybody involved, including Christopher Walken, who's always just here. Let me just take an aside. Why is Christopher Walken so damn entertaining? Why seriously? What it is about Christopher Walken that we all love so much?
It's the voice, and it's funny with the voice. A lot of it's the voice, the mannerisms, and don't forget, when Christopher Walken goes through a script, and I've heard him say this, when Walken goes through a script, he will take out all the periods in his dialogue. And when you realize that, you think to yourself, that's why his line readings are so odd, because he is giving it whatever little jazzy cadence he wants to give it, not based on whatever the punctuation might be.
Let me tell you, I did the oh gosh, what am I? I'm drawing a blank now. The Tony Scott Tarantino film,
True Romance.
True Romance. So I did the True Romance junket, and Christopher Walken is there, dressed all in black. And I remember one of the first questions. Don't even remember who did it. Tim, you know all these people. They ask these dumb questions, and they just drag a junket all the way down. They kill press days. And this one person said to him, "Why do you always wear black?" And Christopher Walken, it was perfect. It was like it had been scripted for him. He sat there, he cocked his head, he smiled. It was perfect Jack Benny timing, like really long. He smiled and he looked up and he goes, "It's clean." That was it. That was the answer. That was the answer.
Wait, so black is clean, or that particular black outfit was clean?
I don't know. Who knows? That was the question. That was the answer. And then we carried on. It sucked all the air out of the room for about 15 minutes, but there it was.
When I was at the Champs-Élysées Film Festival a couple of years ago, he gave a master class, which, by the way, I was desperate to go to because obviously he was there. I was desperate to go to, but I had to go see the James Franco new wave homage, The Pretenders, I think it was called. But he was there, and he's looking a little older. He's definitely turned the corner, which is very sad. But the great thing about him and other folks like Alec Baldwin, whatever, they're just priceless. They can show up in a scene for 4 seconds, and somehow they just light a fire in that scene just by the fact that they're just there. They're just so awesome. So Christopher Walken, I don't care if you're just doing cameos, sitting in a wheelchair, and reading one line of dialogue. As long as you're there, I'm happy.
So we also have a Criterion release called Town Bloody Hall.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I was now, Tim, you're going to have to carry because I knew nothing about this. This is a Chris Hegedus and D.A. Pennebaker doc.
Well, Pennebaker shot it, most of it,
yeah,
and sort of stored it away, and Chris Hegedus sort of picked it up and put it all together. It's Norman Mailer in the early 70s. Engaged in this, I guess you would call it a dialogue with a whole bunch of feminists and other intellectual women, Germaine Greer, Diane Trilling, all of these people who were heavy hitters at the time. And Norman Mailer, of course, a famously macho-istic, writer. He's just north of Hemingway or south, depending on your point of view. And of course, he gets into it, and it's a really interesting, mostly fight. that these have. It's not really a discussion at all. There's a lot of intellectual heft being brought from both sides, but Norman Mailer gets a little snotty and nasty and mean sometimes, and the girls give it back. Gosh. They give as good as they get.
It's really quite fascinating. So I guess the original there was more than 3 hours of footage, which Pennebaker shot and Hegedus cut down. Is that the drill? Yeah. Well, anyway,
About
it's
10 years apart, because the stuff was in the, I want to say the early 70s.
yeah,
But heck,
71,
okay,
1971,
yeah, and he did it in the late 70s or 79,
79.
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Well, anyway, there is an audio commentary that was done in 2004 with Chris Hagedis and Jermaine Greer. And there's footage from a 2004 celebration of the film as well, which brought all the participants back together, except obviously for Norman Mailer, but Dia Pennebaker and certainly the women. Anyway, it's quite good. And then the last criterion is the long-awaited Volker Schlondorf Blu-ray of The Lost Honor of Katharina Blum, directed by Volker Schlondorf and Margareta von Trotta, which is sort of this is one of the seminal new German cinema films. It's from 1975. Not exactly my favorite new German cinema film. I'm not exactly keen on a lot of it, except for Fassbender, but um, it is very typical of those films. Very typical of what they say about society, about German politics of the era. Terrorism and a lot of the instability of post-war German society, really, especially filtered through kind of a quasi-feminist lens. That's where you really get von Trotta's influence in it. Primarily a Schlondorf film at the time, but von Trotta's career really, really shined after this as well. So,
young
not a
Jurgen
lot.
Prochnow in that film.
Yeah, so good. Not a lot by way of special features. There's just an interview from 2002 with both Schlondorf and von Trotta, and then an interview from the same year with Jost Vacano, the cinematographer, who of course would do things like Dust Boat as well, or did Dust Boat in about a decade earlier, up before 2002, but obviously after 1975. So anyway, there is that. I want to make mention, you guys, you all know about Andy Sidaris, right?
Oh
You know
yeah,
who he is.
yeah.
And Andy Sidaris is one of those guys who writes, directs, produces, acts in about 50 movies a year that all basically are the same thing. Him looking cool, surrounded by half naked women, all of them with guns, shooting people. These movies sell like hotcakes to foreign territories at the American film market. They are all basically the same, and there are tons of them coming out now from Mill Creek. They're really a riot. They're a hoot. Mill Creek has a bunch of these. They've got fit. They've got Fit to Kill. They have Hard Hunted. You get all these puns in the titles. They have The Dallas Connection, Day of the Warrior, and lastly, Return to Savage Beach, which has a great tagline: "The big guns are back." And then, of course, three women wearing no brasiers in t-shirts and tank tops with guns. Andy Sidaris understands his audience.
Yeah.
I don't know that I need to actually outline the plot of any of these, because really they're all the same: scantily clad women and Andy Sidaris with guns shooting people. It's
Well,
kind of what you're buying.
I remember being I remember being attracted only by the titles. Like in the late 80s when I heard that there was a movie called Hard Ticket to Hawaii. I don't even know what it was about, but it just seemed really like pre-Baywatch, sexy, cheesy, maybe it's cool kind of thing. And then after that he did a film called Picasso Trigger, which I never saw, but I remember thinking, God, Picasso Trigger. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool.
Sweet.
Oh my goodness.
And he rarely had anybody in these movies that I would ever recognize. It was pretty. These were very low budget, very cheesy, beach
Yeah.
films and
True.
adventure films that were just a bunch of no-name actors in them. But he definitely had a thing. I don't know that he really deserves any sort of reevaluation, but God love him.
He knows it. He knows where his bread is buttered, and he bakes it well.
I made money reviewing those movies for 10 cents a word in the early 90s. So, go away. He put money in my pocket. I love him.
We've got a 25th anniversary steelbook of Clueless with Alicia Silverstone, written and directed by Amy Heckerling. Basically, a modern day adaptation of Emma. How's this film aged 25 years on, guys?
It's funny. Come on, give me the program.
And
It's
to
funny.
me, it doesn't suffer from some of the problems of the films that came along, say, a decade early. Some of those John Hughes films that looked at those relationships between boys and girls, and the girls, we've talked about some reevaluation of some of those films. This one doesn't do that. It's a few years later. The director is Amy Heckler, a lady.
Yeah.
And so it's a cute, funny, sexy little film with the girls and the bosses.
Well, this was produced by Scott Rudin, who's been. It kills me that he's been around that long. Here's the thing that occurs to me watching this film. Paul Rudd is a vampire. I'm kidding. I kid you not. Paul Rudd looks the same in this movie as he does in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
As he does in the Avengers. What's the secret? He looks younger than Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
How like Tom Cruise has aged more.
It is bizarre. But, sometimes when you watch films like Clueless, even if the behavior of the kids sound kind of the same and some of the, some of the phrases that were kind of invented for that movie, people still say, sometimes when you look at films like that and you realize that they're using 10-pound cell phones or driving older cars, it does sort of date it a little. I mean, for someone of my vintage, it makes it nostalgic. But if you're young and discovering it, that might be a little bit of a eye roller. But in terms of the experience of kids that age, I think it's pretty timeless.
Not a bad summation. Paramount presents their ongoing re-release Blu-ray series of classic Paramount titles. Has Volume 7 out now. Airplane from 1980. Airplane ! Which has kind of been rediscovered lately, which I wouldn't have expected. I did watch this again. The jokes still totally work. There's stuff in this thing that I think I missed the first 27 times I saw it.
It's so funny.
It's so funny. And so many of the lines feel like they need to come back into the vernacular. Things like, boy, did I pick the wrong day to stop sniffing glue, and all that Lloyd Bridges stuff is still so damn hilarious.
It's amazing how funny he became, Lloyd Bridges, later in his career. From this, he had run on Seinfeld, from being the sea hunt guy. He was the sexy sea hunt guy. By the time he gets to the back of his career, he's kicking Jerry Seinfeld's ass, and it's go time. It's go time.
I just think that nowadays, if you showed a younger person that movie, they would think it's funny, but they would probably think it's just an hour and a half of dad humor, right?
Yeah.
Because it is sort of like it's not. It's silly in a clever way, so it seems kind of dad humorish. But at the time, it was a gutbuster, and it's still very funny. And by the way, I still will die on the hill of Airplane 2, which was not as funny, but it still has one of the great side gags of all time with William Shatner.
Oh yeah.
That scene where he's at the
that's behind the door. It's great.
He's behind the door. One of the great side gags. But Airplane is just timelessly funny. The Zucker brothers had a great run. They did a lot of great stuff. They did, Naked Gun and Police Squad and
Kentucky Fried Movie. That's of them, right?
Yeah.
Which was pretty good.
Yeah.
That was when they were like kind of more underground and they were kind of waiting for their big break. That was kind of it. They're great, and this movie is very funny.
So got a bunch of movies here from the Warner Archive. Two of these really kind of jumped out at me. Clara's Heart and Michael. Now, Clara's Heart with Whoopi Goldberg and Michael with John Travolta, because these movies seem to have completely fallen off of the wagon of history. I mean, Clara's Heart, I had forgotten. Whoopi Goldberg's obviously coming out of Color Purple. She's been discovered. She's a comedian. She's funny. She can act. She can do it all. So they're trying to find more vehicles for her. I had entirely forgotten this was directed by Robert Mulligan.
Yeah.
Like Man in the Moon discovered Reese Witherspoon Mulligan. Like the directed Anne Bancroft to an Oscar in The Miracle Worker, Robert Mulligan. Like that Robert Mulligan, he directed Clara's Heart. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah,
but this is like later Mulligan.
The little boy in that movie. What I love about that movie most is that though she was taking care of the little white boy, she was a jazz
Neil Patrick Harris. Yeah.
She was a jazz music critic in that movie. And there were these beautiful sequences where she's writing and you're reading some of her criticisms. Right? It's just the whole idea of this black woman was this jazz music expert. But to make a living, she has to take care of this little kid. The late Spalding Harris and Kathleen Quinlan. A lot of really cool people in that movie.
It dates really well. Even though it's late Robert Mulligan, you still feel that really, really humanistic touch, that he brought to Man in the Moon as well. And then Michael, I had forgotten, which is a series of there were like 5 or 6 John Travolta movies that he made right after Pulp Fiction, where they suddenly all went over 100 million. It was that mid-career surge that he enjoyed. And when he had been nobody for years, he'd fallen into B movie territory, and then suddenly Pulp Fiction comes out and everybody wants to be a Travolta fan again, and they all made $100 and some million, and they were all not very good. Michael was directed by Nora Ephron.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
How did I forget that?
Yeah. Karina. You know what? That Karina. That's where she was the jazz music critic. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, but Michael, actually, he was the angel with the wings and the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's bizarre. This is such a weird movie. Such an odd movie. Anyway, it's a very peculiar movie. It doesn't quite work like a lot of Nora Ephron movies, but nonetheless, it's a Nora Ephron movie, and it's got a great soundtrack, and John Travolta is just wonderful and luminous in it, and Andy McDowell and Bob Hoskins.
I don't buy Travolta when he's trying to be sincere or romantic. I just feel like, I don't know what it is about Travolta. I feel like he's got one gear that really resonates with me. All of his other gears, I just don't buy it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It depends on when you're talking about. We go way on back, go all the way back to Saturday Night Fever. Young John Travolta, that guy. So that's, just north of Vinnie Barbarino. But it's a really good dramatic performance. That's a really great dramatic performer. He does Vinny for a good chunk of that movie, but every now and again, he's just so good. So you fast forward, and you get to like those Look Who's Talking movies with Kirstie Alley. And he's playing, that guy, cab driver, pilot, and they get married and the babies. Okay, I thought he was real, because that was not Vinnie Barbarino. That was like this other guy, this sort of dad kind of guy. And then, he goes away, comes back, post Pulp Fiction. And there's a run there where he plays these bad guys. What was that one he did with Christian Slater?
Was that right? That was John Woo, right? Was that John Woo?
Yeah, Broken Arrow. And he has this run of really good bad guys to be played. And then he goes sideways with Battlefield Earth, and it's all gone after that.
Well, who else doesn't age? Friggin' Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah.
Selena. She looks the same now as she did in Selena.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't. Let me tell you something. I bet you, and I've said this about other people before, I bet if like Jennifer Lopez came to you like, in a bikini with no makeup on, you'd be like, God damn, you're 50.
I got to tell you.
You're 50.
Nah, not her. For one thing, she gets naked a lot, Selena. Now, I know it's with good lighting and an excellent cinematographer, but she gets naked a lot. What was the one? The Hustlers? That little thing at the top of Hustlers?
This last year.
Fun. The guy who, I hate to say this, but this is such a droppy thing, but the guy who does my hair, it's hard to believe that I actually have a guy who does my hair. He's the same guy I've been going to for 20 years because I'm so lazy. I don't want to find anybody else. Plus, he always has funny stories. He does Jennifer Lopez's hair.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so he tells stories about her and what a wonderful person she is.
Oh boy.
But he does say that she really tries, man. She works out constantly. She works it as best she can. She knows she's got about 7.5 minutes left until she turns the corner, which is the fate of all humans. So it's okay. But she is gifted in that way, and she works at it really hard in order to extend her shelf life in those sexy movies. But she really has not felt the need to play the mom yet.
Well, good for her. So that's Selena, also from the Warner Archive collection. There's a documentary on here about Selena, which is important because it obviously contextualizes it. And then there's a featurette about the making of Selena. So 10 years after the fact, I still think it's a sharp little Gregory Nava movie. I'm glad he did it.
Yeah.
And then we've got Pride and Prejudice, a very early version of Pride and Prejudice. Starring Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson. Not really. It doesn't date terribly well. It feels like an early Hollywood, 1940s era adaptation of it. It's exactly what you would expect. It's very, very kind of Hollywood glossed up. Clearly was shot in studios and sound stages, but you know what? It's a nice little artifact. It's Greer Garson and Laurence Olivier. You can't exactly dismiss them.
So many versions of that movie, of that story.
So many, and I prefer the most recent one, obviously. There's also John Steinbeck's Cannery Row, which was done into a Deborah Winger and Nick Nolte movie. We talked about Deborah Winger last week and the fact that her performance on Wonder Woman as Drusilla was absolutely the highlight of her career. Nonetheless, she's perfectly fine in this David S. Ward written and directed movie. Cannery Row was kind of a thing in 1982, wasn't it?
I like
Yes.
that movie.
Yeah.
I remember the movie. I liked it. It's good.
Yeah, yeah. Nick Nolte kind of in his prime. Deborah Winger really getting up on things. Three movies I want to talk about here right now, which you will both laugh at, and I obviously can't go into any greater detail as to why they are why we're laughing. But the first one, well, two of them are Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland movies. One is Girl Crazy, the other is Strike Up the Band. Girl Crazy was directed by Norman Turog. Has a lot of great Gershwin music in it, produced by Arthur Freed for his unit MGM. And Strike Up the Band, directed by Tim Busby.
Busby Berkeley.
Yep, Busby Berkeley. Strike Up the Band. And then the other one features Busby Berkeley numbers. It is $1 Million Mermaid with Esther Williams, one of the big splashy movies that sort of gave us synchronized swimming with some amazing Busby Berkeley choreographed stuff in it. These are absolutely lovely transfers. Wonderful, wonderful transfers. I want to say $1 Million Mermaid's colors, they will pop on Blu-ray like I've never seen. Forget about HDR. I know HDR and 4K is supposed to be sort of the state of the art. I cannot believe how beautiful this looks. I cannot believe what an amazing job they did. It's really, really, really just incredibly pristine. It features all kinds of fun stuff in it, including a classic cartoon, The Wise Little Quacker. Har, har, har. And then there's an audio only bonus radio show that includes Esther Williams and Walter Pidgeon. And then Girl Crazy is not exactly the best of the Judy Garland Mickey Rooney films. It's cute, it's clever. They're kind of doing the same shtick they've done before, but Strike Up the Band, the Busby Berkeley one, is absolutely fantastic.
Was Busby a co-director or something director? Girl Crazy too?
He was involved in Girl Crazy, and that's a whole different story that we don't actually have time to try to get into. Yeah. There's drama there involved as well. But Strike Up the Band is really, it's one of the films. He worked first at Warner Brothers, or before that, obviously he did with Sam Goldwyn. But Warner Brothers is where he made a lot of the most famous films. Then migrated to MGM. He eventually went back to Warner Brothers, but this is one of the films he made at MGM, and he started with the Rooney and the Garland films. And they were a thing because of they hadn't done any musical films yet, but then he came over and made their movies musical, and Strike Up the Band is one of those. And they're great. I mean, you forget what an amazing talent Mickey Rooney was. Mickey Rooney is one of the most talented people in the history of movies. We think of him, obviously, as the guy who does that horrible Japanese impersonation in
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Right. In Breakfast at Tiffany's, and then who became kind of a strange, creepy old guy. And, Dana Carvey makes fun of him on SNL. I was the biggest star in the world. But Mickey Rooney was, as a kid, unbelievably talented on a level that is almost incomprehensible. He could dance, he could sing, he could play piano, he played drums. Man, did he play drums.
Yeah.
I mean, he beats those skins like nobody's business in some of those movies. Mickey Rooney at age 19 is like the complete package. It's really kind of astonishing.
And he stayed famous his entire life.
He did what?
He stayed famous his entire life.
He does. That's true. Yes.
His acting career even rejuvenates in the time of television. One of the best Twilight Zones, I guess it is a Mickey Rooney Twilight Zone. I think it's called Big.
You're right.
It's just a wonderful, wonderful. So, you hung around the whole damn time.
Good on you, Mickey. And then the last two Warner Archive titles here. One, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. This is kind of a standard Warner Brothers program, a Romance on the High Seas, with Jack Carson, Janice Page, Don Fiore, and Doris Day. And frankly, this is just kind of a Doris Day vehicle, and it's really kind of like an early version of The Love Boat. It's got some Busby Berkeley stuff in it. Busby Berkeley did the numbers in this one. Not one of his more memorable films. It's the only The Epstein brothers wrote it, but they're kind of phoning it in a little bit. Izzy Diamond, longtime Billy Wilder collaborator, came in and did some additional dialogue. But it's basically it's a fun, lovely Michael Curtiz directed um, uh, Love Boat episode, decades before Love Boat. That's basically what it is. And it's perfectly fine. It really kind of tells you what they were positioning Doris Day to be. She was supposed to be, the girl next door, the very chaste girl next door who wasn't a sex pot. She was just really sweet and lovable, and they wanted to kind of carve her out a place that was different from all the femme fatales of the era, and she did it beautifully. The last one, talk about this for a second. Alfred Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder, 3D.
Yeah.
On Blu-ray. I saw this in school, and I remember thinking, we didn't see it in 3D. We saw it, obviously, you could tell it was shot for 3D, all of the stuff that's supposed to give you a sense of perspective. And I remember thinking it's a little bit like Rope in the sense that it's Hitchcock experimenting with Universal's money, or at the time Warner Brothers money, and not really pulling it off. But why not? Somebody's giving him a budget; he's going to take a risk. Who else did that?
Yeah.
Who else took risks like that with other people's money?
In 1954.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty neat movie. I think Ray Milland, Grace Kelly. I like that score, Dmitri
Tiomkin.
Yeah. As opposed to, but I remember that it was pretty good.
You know what? I bet, even though it's considered not top shelf Hitchcock, I bet if this movie was directed by anybody else, you would think it's amazing.
Probably true.
But because it's Hitchcock and knowing who he is, don't forget, like, Hitchcock was like a name brand director back when that didn't even really exist. He was a name. He was a recognizable face. He had a show where he would appear and he would cameo in his movies. He was a name brand director in a way that we now are used to with the Tarantinos and the JJs and the whatever. But back then they didn't really do that. He was kind of one of the first real name brand directors, and so the bar was always very high. So Dial M for Murder, which, by the way, I defend, along with Rope, by the way, I defend Rope as a movie, not just as an experiment. I like it a lot. It is a bit of an experiment, but I just think because it's Hitchcock and maybe he was a little off his game, people are not universally loving it. But if it had anybody else's name on it, you think it was great.
Yeah.
Well, it is a really interesting, tight, claustrophobic film. It's a love triangle, basically, Grace Kelly with Robert Cummings and Ray Milland. Yeah, she's great. She is terrific. And and to their credit, Warner Archives said, you know what? It was done in 3D. We know that 3D televisions are no longer being produced, that it was a flash in the pan, but they mastered this for 3D television. So anybody who still has a 3D television, a Blu-ray 3D television, this may be one of the very last actual 3D Blu-rays that you're going to get for it. Probably the last catalog title for it. So kudos to the people at Warner Archive. They did a great job on all of this stuff. Really, really fun stuff. And so glad to see them exploiting the Busby Berkeley catalog. Really glad. In any case, guys, I think that wraps it up for us.
All right. Mark was here. Mark was here.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark in the house.
Mark in the house.
Wade and Tim, anytime you guys want to have me back to talk about documentaries no one will ever see, please contact me.
Well, and now we will wrap the show out with my pre-recorded anime segment. And Tim, we are also going to do an intermediate show. We're going to resurrect an old interview that has new relevance in the next week or so as well. Did you want to plug that by any means?
Producer, friend of ours, interview we did a while ago, Neil Cohen, Zach Norman, wonderful actor, director that people will know. Look up Zach. They made a movie called Chief Zabu. In 1986, and it took them about 35 years to reconstruct that movie, find it, and release it. And it's now streaming every place. It's so funny, and it is just so a part of the contemporary zeitgeist of the day. Let's just say Trump and things like that play a part. Very, very funny. So we'll reprise that interview and talk about that movie a little bit.
We will do that in the next week or so. So in the meantime, everybody stay safe, be well, and here is my pre-recorded segment on anime to close out the show. We have not talked about anime for a number of months, and that's just been one of the casualties of the fulfillment issues that we have been facing. But a lot of this is slowly normalizing. So for anime fans, we've put together a little segment here. I've spent the last few days going through a lot of the anime that we've received, and there's a lot of great stuff here. An anime for given how what breadth it has, what a diversity of content, and how long some of these seasons run. If you are getting bored during quarantine and lockdown and getting tired of no new product out there, and you are an animation fan or especially an anime fan, there are binge watching opportunities galore with all of this. I want to start off with a couple of a lot of the Funimation stuff, some of the standalone, really great Funimation titles that have gone on forever. And there are entire universes here that just never ever seem to end, and they just give their writers and their artists endless opportunities for creativity. One of them is One Piece, the pirate fantasy adventure, which is now in season 10. This is season 10, Voyage 1. This is not on Blu-ray. This is only on DVD. But it continues to be really imaginative and really really enjoyable. This has special features, uncut and unedited. These are episodes 575 to 587 on two different DVDs, and it's loaded with lots of really really fun stuff. Somehow, after 10 seasons, they are still able to maintain the enjoyment factor. Similarly long is Fairy Tale, and this is a Blu-ray and DVD combo set of the final season of Fairy Tale, which has just been endless. This is volume 23 overall, if you've been keeping up with this. And it is more the same. It's probably less inventive and imaginative than One Piece overall, but it's not designed to. It doesn't skew quite as young as One Piece, and this takes the Fairy Tale Guild into all kinds of new areas for their very, very last adventure. And there's no reason to sort of go into any of the details. If you've watched this from the beginning, then you know exactly what to expect. What is particularly interesting is a new one to me, Bungo Stray Dogs. And Bungo Stray Dogs is basically a combination of noir and supernatural adventure. It's like noir detective meets supernatural adventure. It's really very clever. It's beautifully drawn, really incredibly well drawn, and very imaginatively conceived. This entire world. I mean, the costumes and the backgrounds and the colors and a lot of the other stuff they do. It's very interesting. This is now in season 3. Always a villain in there. It reminds me a little. There's a little bit of kind of a steampunky quality, Wild West to it. If you're familiar with that show, but boy, it's really really interesting, and it grabs you. Even if you're not fully caught up on the first 2 seasons, you'll thoroughly enjoy it. And if you do buy season 3 on Blu-ray and DVD, you might want to also invest in the Blu-ray DVD combo set Bungo Stray Dogs Dead Apple, which is like a prequel to season 3. It's a movie, it's a feature, and it leads into season 3. So it gives you a much more expansive storyline. Very, very interesting. Really, really cool is Million Arthur, the complete series. Million Arthur is one of those feminist adventure sagas that is centered kind of around the Arthurian legend of Excalibur, and it takes the whole idea into a completely new area, which is interesting. It's more about the sword than it is any of the Arthurian legend stuff that is centered around it. But it does all go back to England, and it sort of tries to reinvent it in an anime way that is pretty cool, and it goes in places you wouldn't expect it to. So it shows that there's a lot of life left in the Arthurian legends. Some of the best artwork I have yet seen in any anime over the last 15, 20 years is Fairy Gone. Fairy Gone, spelled just like it sounds. This is the beginning of it, season 1, part 1. And this is from, if you'd ever seen Cells at Work, this is the same director as all that. And this is about people, former government soldiers, who are able to summon fairies to do their bidding for them. It's really really cool. and it all takes place in kind of a post-apocalyptic fantasy alternate future and alternate environment. And the idea is also that it is possible to be an unlicensed um, summoner of fairies and to do so illicitly and against the government. That's kind of an adaptation of the old issue of weapons under the shoguns in Japan. So they've adapted that idea to this kind of cool post-apocalyptic fantasy environment. It's really, really beautiful, and I cannot wait to see where this goes. You are going to want to watch all 12 episodes of this. This is just a brand new anime saga. It doesn't require a great deal of getting up to speed. It's beautifully done in every conceivable way. Kind of cute is The Ones Within, which is a complete series. Kind of skews young. This is all oriented toward the obsession of gaming and streaming with young kids, presumably young kids, especially in Japan, and gets into the whole Ready Player One kind of thing, where you live in the game or you're transported into a game. We can go back as far as Tron to talk about that. It's really just kind of wish fulfillment, digital youth kid wish fulfillment stuff. No, not for all tastes, but if you have really really young kids, it might play to them. Also, kind of oriented toward young girls is Mix Mise Story Part Two. If you caught Part One, it's more of the same. 12 episodes here. One of them with a commentary. It's it's high school stuff. It's basically a sequel to a 1985 manga about baseball that was called Touch, and it's high school baseball championship and politics and everything else. It is what it is. It's a very particular genre, and it's only for certain acquired taste. Black Clover, which feels like it's been around forever. This is season two, part five, and again, more of the same basically here. It's the Wizard King and all of the palace and political intrigue that centers around him and his team of knights, and it is feudal and it is medieval and it is anime and it's kind of fantastic and it's otherwise pretty much like all the rest of that stuff that you've ever seen. We also have a parts one and two of A Girl Who Chants Love at the Bound of This World. I don't know where they come up with these titles, but that's it. YU-NO, subtitled A Girl Who Chants Love at the Bound of This World. This is parts one and two. Some will obviously remember this as a game. This was a digital adventure game from the mid '90s. Basically about someone looking for their parents between alternate dimensions. Definitely a fantasy adventure, youth wish fulfillment. Lots of interesting twists and turns. Does get a little bit confusing at times, but otherwise extremely well done. So that might be worth a look if that's your vibe. We've also got Dumbbell. How heavy are the dumbbells you lift? The complete series. Again, based on a manga and kind of routine youth comedy stuff. This is about a girl who can't stop eating, so she joins the gym and enter the athletic competition. We've obviously this stuff goes for baseball and basketball and swimming, and they have all kinds of sort of athletic oriented stuff. This is one of the funnier ones. It's not really about athletic competition. It's sort of again youth teen politics, but it's cute and intermittently funny. Complete series of Copcraft. This is again also noir influenced and very interesting. This is not based on a manga, but actually a light novel, and it takes place in kind of a mystical, magical, alternate world that has a connection to the Earth. There's like this existential link between the two of them. And so you get all kinds of magical creatures that come from the other world to the Earth and back and forth. We now have this kind of stargate between the two, and that means that you get crime going between the two. And so now there's a whole new noir element to detective work and to police work between the two worlds. Very interesting idea, very well executed. A lot of really, really great artwork. Complete series. Don't know why it didn't last longer, but here it is in one fantastic Blu-ray set. Copcraft, the complete series. We also have the rather spectacular complete series of Kochoki, which is basically a mythical feudal coming of age story of a young warlord heir and his brother and their team as they fight for what is rightfully theirs. All very nicely done. Obviously not for all tastes, but it's good. And then we wrapping out the Funimation stuff. We'll start with a complete series of Demon Lord Retry, which may or may not be the complete series because of the way that it ends, which is actually kind of amusing. So there very could well be, might well be spin-off series and other things. But in any case, Demon Lord Retry is a more kind of adventure oriented to gaming and people who love gaming and trying to bring that add an extra dimension, all of that adventure. This thing has quite a following on manga, and it's kind of I guess a big deal. If you know all of the other incarnations and permutations of it, it probably makes a lot more sense. But as strictly judging from the anime show, you really kind of have to be a gamer. You really got to kind of be into gaming and immersing yourself in those worlds generally to really really appreciate it. Legend of the Galactic Heroes, season 2 is I had to go back and revisit season 1 to kind of fill in some of the blanks. It's pretty narratively dense. And it does require, obviously, keeping track of a lot of characters and a lot of politics. This is all Galactic Empire stuff. This is kind of in the same vein as Star Blazers and a lot of the subsequent shows that deal with kind of Star Wars-ish intergalactic empires and galactic wars and so forth. It's all of that same kind of politics, the Free Planets Alliance, and all of the things that go on between them. Again, if you don't have season 1, it's going to take some time to get up to speed here. So I would recommend that you not sort of pick this up with season 2. You would start with season 1. We've talked about Strike Witches before. We have the complete series of Strike Witches now in a single Blu-ray set. Skew's pretty young, but adults can watch it too. You can certainly enjoy it with your kids. There's some fun stuff and some cute comedy that goes on. The artwork is fine. Really, but it's even Skew's younger, I think, even than the Pokemon set. Ensemble stars, more fantastic teen politics with this private school that teaches young boys how to become pop stars. It's one of the silliest ideas I've ever seen, but somehow it manages to be kind of funny and entertaining, and I'm sure it's a huge hit among Japanese kids, and it'll probably take off here as well. I'm sure this is a hit in Korea too, where boy bands are all the rage. They're a little bit less the rage in the United States now, but I'm sure there's still enough fuel for that fire. And that's basically it. It's like all the sports competition and the young showbiz competition shows, except it's oriented toward young pop stars. Kind of in the anime vein, from Well-Go is this wonderful movie called A Dog's Courage, which just came out recently and got no theatrical exposure, obviously, given our pandemic moment. But good on Well-Go for picking this up and bringing it out. This is basically about a dog named Jacob who is abandoned and winds up becoming the leader of this team of strays on this fantastic adventure that really has all kinds of wonderful little narrative twists and turns, and the characters, each one of these strays is delightfully done. The voice work is terrific. It's really worth checking out. This is Korean animation, so we should point out it's not Japanese animation; it's Korean animation, but it kind of belongs to the overall anime umbrella. That's the audience that it is targeting, and it does so beautifully. Korean animation obviously is not a new thing. A lot of the early work for shows like The Simpsons and a lot of other stuff in the United States was done by Korean animators. So there is a very strong and long and proud tradition of animation in Korea, and when they do their own animation, it is equally impressive. There's a lot of really great animation talent in Korea. Also, some from Shout Factory, who keeps giving us all kinds of really great anime courtesy of G Kids. I got a couple things here. Ride Your Wave is just so beautiful. This is from the legendary director Masaki Yuasa, and it includes wonderful extras, all kinds of storyboards, and there's an interview with one of the producers who is Korean. Again, we should point out. And the story here is about a surfer, basically, a college student who loves surfing and who has this wonderful romance while living in a small seaside town where he has just moved. And then something horrible happens, and something magical happens. And I'll give you nothing beyond that, but it winds up going from what seems like just sort of an ordinary coming of age teen adventure into something mystical and magical and existential and philosophical. And that, of course, opens up all kinds of artistic opportunities, which are amazing, just absolutely amazing. I could almost see this being equally great as a live action film, but it isn't for now. It's Ride Your Wave. It is an absolutely beautiful work of anime from the great director Masaki Yuasa. Also from Shout Factory is Promare. Now, Promare was the top anime feature theatrically in 2019. Shout Factory and G Kids want to make sure you understand that, and they've released this both in a regular Blu-ray DVD combo set with a couple of short film prequels and interviews and all kinds of interesting little extras, which is plenty for most people. And if you're really hardcore, you're going to want to get the bigger, heftier, limited collector's edition, which is enormous. And it has all of the other stuff, plus the CD soundtrack, a 52-page booklet, the original script translated into English, a poster, and a decal sticker, if that's meaningful for anybody. It's a pretty big deal. So for hardcore anime fans, this is really a big thing. This is basically another epic journey in the Joseph Campbell mode, as you find very frequently in anime, which represents kind of the second stage of this epic war between two different mutant tribes. Many decades after it began, the Burnish are the bad guys here, and they invaded the Earth, and they're pretty scary, and obviously lots of great artwork opportunities in there as well. Anyway, and the messianic figure here is Leo Fotia, who leads Mad Burnish, which is the anyway. I won't get into the politics of it, but it's very interesting. It's extremely artistic and well conceived, and it's worth checking out. It's Promare in both a regular edition and a collector's edition, a limited collector's edition that's loaded with stuff, including a 52-page booklet. The third G Kids and Shout Factory title here is a kind of a famous one. Satoshi Kon, one of the all-time great gods of the Japanese anime pantheon, made a one of the more popular anime films of the last 20 years with Tokyo Godfathers. And that is now out in an absolutely beautiful Blu-ray and DVD collection, a single set, Blu-ray DVD combo set, with a brand new 4K based transfer. Now it's Blu-ray, not a 4K, but it's taken from a 4K scan of the original elements. A new English dub, brand new, beautifully done, great voice work, as well as Satoshi Kon's short film. There's a short film here, a making of featurette on it, a sound mixing featurette, and then kind of a behind the scenes featurette that's a little bit different from the making of featurette. And lots of other stuff. Anyway, Tokyo Godfathers, absolutely terrific, beautiful film. Probably not for all tastes, but it's funny and it's touching, and it goes in places you don't necessarily expect it to go. It's a really very timely story that follows three homeless people in Tokyo who find a baby girl in a garbage dump on Christmas Eve. It's a little bit of Three Men and a Baby. It's a little bit of The Fisher King. It's a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life. It's all sort of all of those things wrapped together, and it goes in places you just don't expect it to go. It's really a very, very beautiful film. Again, it has the behind the scenes and making of featurettes, an interview as well with the actress Shakina Naifak, and a terrific introduction from the deputy director of film for the Japan Society in New York City. So, Tokyo Godfathers from G Kids and Shout Factory is wonderful. Just a few more here. We also have from the terrific people at Sunrise and Right Stuff another Gundam entry. Again, Gundam is maybe the most expansive universe ever created for film or television, including anything with Marvel, anything to do with Star Wars, anything to do with Star Trek. Nothing remotely approaches Gundam. This is after war Gundam X. And Gundam spans thousands of years and more light years in the universe than anybody has any business even trying to calculate. It is, of course, it is mecha oriented. It belongs to the mecha subgenre of anime. And this takes place in what is kind of an alternate timeline to the Gundam universe. It's a little hard to keep track of, but all you really need to know about this one is that it takes place after many years after a horrible, devastating war, and kind of a post-apocalyptic moment when they're trying to rebuild, and hopefully rebuild without triggering all of the political and tribal conflicts that arose the first time, which of course they naturally do. Otherwise, there's no drama. And it's pretty great once you kind of wrap your head around where this fits in the Gundam timeline, and how it relates to the other half dozen or so series that preceded it. Pretty great stuff. Pretty great stuff. So that is from Right Stuff Anime. You can go to rightstuffanime.com. And this is via the Sunrise Library. That is After War Gundam X. And lastly, two installments in the series Aria, Aria the Natural and Aria the Origination. These are really, really sweet, kind of very, very engaging stories. This is Aria the Natural is part 2. Aria the Origination is the whole series in one set. These are from the Nozomi catalog and distributed by Section 23 here, as is all of the Sentai stuff. We'll be covering a lot of Sentai in a future episode. But Aria, the Aria stuff is based on manga, again, as usual, and takes place on the planet Aqua, which is the futuristic, many hundreds of years in the future planet Mars, now that it's been terraformed and turned into basically kind of an almost very, very lush water planet. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth mentioning that there's been modeling, computer modeling of what a terraformed Mars would look like, where the oceans would be, where the continents would be, where the islands would be. This is very, very cool stuff. If you want to look at it online, and you'll see this is not so far off. The Aria stuff is not so far off, imagining a predominantly water-governed futuristic Mars. Mars would have substantially more water in a ratio compared to land masses than Earth does. It's quite extraordinary. Because of that, everything is sort of Venetian in the future. Gondolas, and it's like a new version of Venice, and it centers around the company of the namesake, Aria. The Aria company is basically a water gondolier company. And it's about this girl, Akari Mizunashi, who wants to work her way up, and she's just arrived on the planet, and it's her adventures and relationships and all that stuff. It's not overly fantasy oriented. It's not too sci-fi-ish. It's not mecha. It doesn't have any of those things. It's just very, very sweet and humanistic, and it's kids can enjoy it. I think young adults and adults can all enjoy it. Aria is really kind of unique in the world of anime at the moment. So, with that, Aria the Natural Part 2 and Aria the Origination, all of it on Blu-ray from Nozomi via Section 23. Really, really worth checking out. Thanks for listening to this week's show, and we will be back with a rather unique and novel show next week. Hope you enjoy it. Take care.